There is a great deal of chatter about a new Leaf coach once again.
Yeah.
And they're on this West Coast trip, and they gave up a lead last night.
I watched that last night.
And lost.
By the way, please make note of this. McCowan is bringing up hockey, and I'm not.
I know. Okay? I'm stunned.
Well, the Toronto Maple Leafs are, what are they, about 9th in the Eastern Conference?
No, they're still 7th. They're in a playoff spot still.
Yeah. This is a team that many people thought should be a Stanley Cup team this year. I would never have said that. But what's the matter with them? And do they need a new head coach? And if they do, who should it be?
So, John, let me, before you answer that as our hockey expert, here's what I would say. And this is probably obviously sort of what Treliving has to think about. You know, at a certain point, like Martin Jones is Martin Jones, right? I mean, the guy gave you an unbelievable stretch, but he's still a third-string goalie. So if you're going to judge Keefe, like how much can you judge Sheldon Keefe on how the team is playing in front of ultimately a third-string goalie? Again, they gave up a lead, which, you know, they shouldn't have. They outplayed the Oilers for a period and a half plus in that game. But like, that's my only thing with Keefe is I think Keefe has got a bad hand he's got to play right now, and I think it'd be a little unfair to judge him on that. Judge him when Joe Wall's back.
Yeah, the other issues are that I think got exposed last night was depth in the forwards is an issue, in defense is an issue.
But that's on the GM, right? That's not on the coach.
That's on somebody other than the coach. Yeah. Now, does the coach have to adapt a little bit to make things a little more palatable for his roster? Yes. Do they have to change a few things? Yes. Why isn't William Nylander, playing at the same level now that he was before Christmas? Who knows?
Well, he signed the big money deal. That's why.
Okay.
Got his money, now he's going to coast.
So, and the answer is in a league that has a cap and guaranteed contracts, it's easy to fire the coach. I think it's far too soon to fire the coach. It doesn't make any sense to fire the coach at this point.
You probably have fans who are like, they see what happened in Edmonton, right? Because that coaching changed the season.
Fans and owners, Richard, and this is what's happened. Particularly in hockey, is that owners take note, and owners take note to situations and say, "Well, hold on, listen, Chris Knobloch's gone to Edmonton and they're 21 and 6, yeah. 21 and 6, and have not changed one player, really." On that roster, and they're playing much better. Can that happen in Toronto? I mean,
would you?
Three other teams made coaching changes very rapidly after the Oilers for the same reason, because they thought that, and both know this. If you get in the playoffs in hockey, you have a chance to win the Stanley Cup. Yep. Just get in, and you have a chance. Florida proved that last year.
Would you take a run at Quenneville?
You're not allowed to touch Quenneville.
If he was available. Because he could be available at any moment.
I don't think he's available at any moment yet, Bob. But the answer is, if Gary Bettman wrote a memo to 32 clubs and said Joel Quenneville is now officially allowed to be a coach in the National Hockey League, Joel Quenneville would have a job in 7 minutes and probably have 10 teams after him.
Would the Leafs be one of them?
I think they'd have to be. So for the simple reason that, there is an expectation in Toronto that this team, not only makes the playoffs, but goes a distance in the playoffs. Do you think
the general manager is being allowed to do what he really wants to do? Or is the president of the organization dictating what's happening?
No, I think Brad's able to do what he wants to do right now. I think it's on Brad's table to, particularly when times are tough. I think it's up to Brad to fix it.
Well, it's time to fix something.
Yeah, the trade deadline.
And he hasn't done anything of real significance.
The trade deadline for the Leafs is, as always, huge.
But Joseph Woll has a bad ankle sprain. If Woll had stayed if Wall had stayed healthy.
This was the guy who may not
this
have
would be a
made the
different
team at the
conversation.
beginning of the year.
Yeah, there's the again, I realize that this is an age-old problem in Toronto, and this is a problem in other places, but the Samsonov killed them this year because that there was
Yes.
an expectation that at least he would be able to keep you in games, and he's unusable. And they're probably cost him 12 to 14 points so far. And Treliving's going to have to make a big decision. I'm not sure there's no decision. He has to bring a goalie in. And the question is, what kind of assets are you going to give up for that? But he almost has to, I think.
Well, and let's face it, the cupboard is not completely stocked to 100% because of assets that have been given up the last couple of years to acquire other players.
That's right.
So in many ways, Brad brought in Max Domi. He brought in Tyler Bertuzzi. There are still some issues that
These are guys that have done very little.
Klingenberg.
Very little. But there are some issues that are still haunted by Kyle Dubas's decisions for this.
Of course, of course, they were Dubas's decisions, but the president of the club endorsed them, and now he has absorbed it.
Actually, there's one decision that he did not endorse that did not occur a couple of years. Kyle Dubas had a deal in place to acquire Marc-Andre Fleury. It was done.
Really?
It was a done deal. They could have had Marc-Andre Fleury from Chicago before he got traded to Minnesota, and Brendan vetoed it.
Wow.
No kidding.
What were the assets given back?
I can't remember off the top of my head. It would be wrong for me to remember, but there was probably a first round pick involved, and maybe a young player. I think probably Matthew Nyes was on that list. And I mean, where has Matt Nyes gone? He's hit the wall himself this year.
Totally.
But there was a deal in place, and they just needed the rubber stamp endorsement of the president of the Toronto Maple Leafs for it to occur, and it did not occur.
John, do you think again, it's all hindsight now, and I know the cap was a big issue here, but did they screw up with Zach Hyman? Was there a way to have made that happen?
Well, but Zach Hyman was a victim of the core four. They did not, and they knew they had to sign Morgan Riley to an extension soon. So after all the money they had given Tavares and Matthews and Marner and Nylander, and again Nylander again, they felt that Zach, who they thought had a wonky knee, they thought he was expendable. Their last offer to him was $4.25 million.
What did the Oilers sign him for? 7? 6?
No, 7 years, but 5.5, I believe the number.
Okay. Right.
Yeah,
Just
I was
over
going to say 5-4.
Yeah, so just over 5. So they wanted to keep him, but he was going to have to pay the price for those other guys who they felt were bigger parts of the machine to succeed. And it's it was a terrible mistake because not only on the ice but off the ice too, Richard.
Yeah, but I mean,
this guy is a salt of the earth.
Awesome. Yeah, children's author. I mean, this is what sucks about hockey is that if there was no salary cap, then the Maple Leafs would be the Dodgers. They really would be. They would have.
Well, they could be the Dodgers.
They'd have the highest payroll in the league. None of these guys would go, and seats would obviously be exorbitant and through the roof. But how they'd run the franchise.
What do you mean? You mean more exorbitant?
No, I know. Yeah, you're right. More exorbitant. But that's not changing. I mean, unfortunately, that's the reality of the NHL.
Yeah, it's not. And by the way, last night's Edmonton Toronto. Could you imagine if that was the Stanley Cup final? Imagine what this country would be like.
It'd be all. I mean, NBC would. I'm sorry, ESPN Turner wouldn't be happy. But it was great. That game. The reason I watched that game, and I'm a big tennis fan, so I actually turned away from the Australian Open. It was so much fun to watch. It was just a fun game to watch.
I was talking to a couple of friends in the industry by a text during the game and said, "Could you imagine what this country would be if Edmonton played Toronto in the Stanley Cup final and the level of competition?"
I know.
What's that? Oh no, but Hey, listen, we can all dream, Bob. We can all
Yeah.
dream.